Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Suited and Booted. I'm your host, Jarogba, and to my right we have
Lord Mahazi.
And today we are somewhere different. This is not where we usually film. We are at the wonderful new home of Melbourne City out here at Casey Fields. We've just done the tour, which you guys will see soon. It's absolutely world-class, state-of-the-art facilities. And we've been granted the time of Michael Petrillo, Simon Zappia. Gentlemen, how are you?
Very good, thanks. Thanks for the invitation.
Simon, how are you, mate?
Very, very well.
Beautiful. Now, for those who don't know, I guess just give a simple rundown of your job and responsibilities at the club, and then we can dive into the questions.
So, I'm a director of football, basically look after the football department as a whole, from the first team, women's academy as well. So, yeah, that's basically it.
Yep. Simon?
Yeah, and I'm the academy manager, so obviously work under Michael, but managing our 6 teams we've got in the boys' academy at Melbourne City, so coaches, staff, players, everything like that.
So is there another head of academy just for the girls' sides?
We don't have a girls' academy just yet. Something that's definitely in the pipeline.
Yep.
Hopefully in the next couple of years when we get a few more allowances.
Well, the reason is because we're not allowed to at the moment.
Yeah.
The Federation won't allow us to have any women's teams.
Really?
Otherwise we would. Yeah.
What do you mean?
We're not allowed to have any academy teams.
How come?
We're not. The Federation won't allow us to have a team in the
Part of our NPL license.
Yeah, part of the NPL license. We can have boys and the men's, but we can't have any women's teams.
And you don't know what the reasoning behind that is?
No. Well, I don't know if
Look, we could go into things probably for another day, but
we're working on it.
We're working on it. We've got within our Melbourne City Football School program, there's girl select squads in there now where we get a number of talented girls in, a number of them training with the A-League women this week as well. So we're starting to try and build that pathway, and hopefully over the next couple of years can expand on that.
All right. I guess we'll start with most clubs in world football have this sort of 360-degree strategy for their club, for how they want their teams to play, their football philosophy, their playing style. What is it at Melbourne City? How much does it tie into with Manchester City? And talk to us about how that trickles down from the first team all the way down to the 14s? Is that
14s, yeah.
14s. So tell us about that side of things, first and foremost.
Yeah, so, I mean, we actually start really younger with our Melbourne City Football School program, which acts as our pre-academy. And some of the methodology they're working on there then carries into, like you said, the 14s, into our older academy age groups, and then into the first team. I think we are unique in a sense where we have a philosophy across every team of the club, even our youngest players, and we call it beautiful football. Now that can be subjective and what that means, but I think it's been quite proven in how we play in our academy teams and even in the first team. And I think your viewers will understand the Manchester City style a bit more and how that looks in terms of really dominating the ball, but then being really hungry to win it back as soon as we can. It's a big part of what we want to do. We want to have control of the ball, 90% of the time, or as much as possible, really. And then within that, building through the thirds, creating the best chance possible to score goals, and score lots of goals, really. And then the byproduct of that is the opposition doesn't have the ball, so we can see less goals.
Yep.
Really.
That's in a nutshell.
How do you find trying to implement that at so many different age levels, and also with kids that'll come in and it's like, wow, he's really talented, say, in this field, but then he might struggle in terms of, philosophy or understanding tactics or strategy. So how do you manage that particular task of, okay, we've got to make sure that we have everyone playing pretty much similar to the men's team?
Yeah. So I think what we have within our academy, so each age group or phase that they jump, there's then different expectations in the style of football. So it essentially gets more advanced the closer they get to the first team.
Yep.
And maybe the principles become more specific the closer they get to the first team. And it has to look, our under-23s that play in the VPL1 team, VPL1 competition will look very similar to the A-League. Where below that, there'll be similarities, but obviously we're trying to just expand on that each and every year. And obviously the younger age groups, we're trying to promote creativity in that and individualism. We need the players being themselves as much as possible, and really building that super strong foundation. Technically, that's the main thing. So the tactics or the game model is a byproduct of that, because we feel the game model allows the players to perform in a certain way and drive that creativity. And then obviously as we increase in the age group, that's when the specificity increases, if you like.
Can I just ask, historically, where does this philosophy methodology come from? Is it Pep driven? Is it because obviously he's come into Man City, played in that way, and then it seems like there might be some similarities.
Yeah.
Like, where does it all come from?
Oh, I'm not probably going to answer. It happened at Manchester before Pep, so it came in when Sheikh Mansour and his group bought the club, and they wanted to change the way that they play football, and there's obviously an influence from people who came originally from Barcelona, like Ferran Soriano, who's the CEO. And Chicky Bexstein, who's the football director. So he would have been the one that really started the process at Manchester. And then obviously we feed off that. But it's important that we bring people into the organisation that actually believe in that way of playing football. And we try and bring them players that best suit that type of football.
And you were just touching on individualism, creativity. We get flogged every week with questions about, even last week we had a whole discussion on, coaches in Australia only coach systems. They don't want to teach fundamentals. Players aren't allowed to be themselves anymore. How do you go about allowing that whilst also adhering to the system? Like you were saying that almost comes first, and then is that what you're saying?
At the younger age groups, of course. Yeah. So I think the system we play allows for the creativity in the players. So if we get our wingers receiving the ball 30 times in a game in 1v1 position, then they get to be creative 30 times in a game. If they're only receiving it once and it's a flick on from a long ball, that's going to be very difficult, isn't it? So the system allows them to be creative within it. And same for your number 10s to find the killer pass. Same for the centre-backs to drive past a player or maybe play a skip pass or a longer pass. That's all being creative as well. Those we feel the system allows for the players to have a lot more repetitions in the younger age groups at being creative or doing what they're good at. And ultimately, that's what we're trying to get players to do.
That answers that for me.
I've got a bit further a question because it sounds, from what I've heard about the methodology, it's probably kind of opposite to the way that we run our soccer academy. And I guess there's no right and wrong, but the way I view individual development in terms of for kids is to give them as much opportunity to decision make as possible and to work the game out. And as far as I've heard, within the City model, there's a lot of systematic movements and specific things that they're supposed to do on and off the ball. Would that be accurate?
Well, look, from a first team perspective, it's going to be more specific. I think going into an A-League professional environment, from an academy perspective, is what I'll speak about. It's not too specific. It's about what we call it finding the best mini game to play. So where's the 2v1 where we can penetrate? That might be going out the right, might be playing through, around, over. It's not specific at all. It's trying to play through the thirds, but finding the best overload on the pitch to play through that.
Yeah. So they get a lot of opportunity to make a decision, in terms of what are they going to play. So it's not, if you're here, you have to pass the ball there. They'll get given options at training. So we could do this. We could, depending on where the opposition are. So then that's where the decision making comes in that game context. So then on the field of play, they make those decisions, and it could be one of 3 or 4 different decisions that they have to make. So that's how they learn that decision making. So it's not that pass has to go there and that one has to go here. It really, it's in the context of the game in that moment, and they have to make decisions. Because otherwise, if we are telling them it's got to be that structured, we're creating robots. And you know what football's like. It's not going to be perfect. And there'll be the opposition, you can't dictate exactly what the opposition are going to do. So there's a lot of decision making that the players have to make, and as they go through the system, they're going to make more and more. And hopefully by the time they get to the first team, they've been exposed to those opportunities to make those decisions, so they make better ones. That makes sense.
We speak with every player when they're scanning or taking in the information. We speak about ball, space, teammate, opponent, and where's the goal.
What is it? Say it again.
Ball, space, teammate, and opponent. And then finally the goal. So where you're trying to go to.
There's a lot of information that's got to go into that.
Trying to take that in and work on it. But we also, like one night a week, we spend just on the player's individual development plan, just working on the technical attributes they need. So there's a lot that obviously goes in. It's not just the game model and how it looks in the pictures. Look, in the academy, most of it's to do with the individual and just trying to help them.
That what you just said now, again, beginner brain here. Rash has a bit more, just a little bit more experience than me. But in terms of when you said working on individual traits that they need to get better at, how do you nurture a talent that is so good at one particular thing or maybe a handful of things that just will never be a pure finisher or a pure passer? How do you deal with those types of players?
Yeah, look, I think when any player comes into the academy, we bring them in as young as kind of 11 or 12.
Yeah.
Even at that age, the players are starting to develop a super strength that makes them better than other players. So the number one thing with any IDP or individual development plan is trying to hone in on their super strength and make that as best we can, because that might be the trait that gets him to A-League level. Medin Mehmedi's finishing is maybe what has allowed him to be there. The way Geordie Boss carried the ball and run with it, that maybe got him to A-League. They've got other strengths as well.
Yeah.
And I guess their weakness is we're just trying to get to a point where they're efficient enough to get by. And then as the years develop, then it becomes position specific. So if they're not a great finisher, maybe play them a bit deeper and they're a better playmaker, or they start to develop more physical traits to get on the outside as a fullback. We can play them on the outside. Different things as they get a little bit older.
How often do players change positions coming up, especially when they're younger?
Yeah.
How common is that? Because, you hear a lot of players like, say, Virgil van Dijk said he used to be a striker. Now he's one of the best centre-backs in the world. So how often do the younger players change positions? And when do you find it usually solidifies?
Yeah, so I think, and part of when we've sat down with the guys in Manchester and how they do it, and we try and follow a similar model here, is every young player, we try and give them 2 positions that they can be really competent at a young age. Then as they develop through that, might become more specific. But yeah, players will change. I think the biggest part of that can be their physical development. So when they're 12, they're all kind of similar, they're all quite athletically, they can move quite well, but then some will shoot up, some will get more stocky, some will develop more speed, and that can then play a factor in what position they might do. And that's where you see sometimes a change at 14, 15 once they go through puberty. Then it might look different once they come out of it.
So that's the main age, you'd say 15-ish.
Yeah, 15, 16. Again, some players will go through puberty at 13, some will go at 15, 16, 17.
I had a beard in grade 2, grade 3, something like that.
I'm still waiting to go.
Okay, beautiful. Obviously, you guys have probably the most notorious academy in terms of producing players. We've got Metcalf, Atkinson, Boss, Arzani, McGree, Glover. How are these players specifically nurtured? If you have like a story for one of them, maybe that there was a specific thing that you guys did that really helped them reach those heights, and then going on from that, who do we have to keep an eye out on in the future?
You can.
Yeah, I think, and Michael will know, say, Connor Metcalf's journey a little bit better than others, but Connor was a late developer. So when he was 15, he was still the size of a 12, 13-year-old, and he had to be patient. We had to be very patient with him, and I know his introduction to the first team was maybe a little bit more delayed, or they looked after him a lot more. Michael might be able to speak more to that because he was around.
Yeah, Connor was interesting because we always knew he was a really talented player, but as Simon said, he was tiny, 15. When I first saw him, I thought, I don't think we can bring him in. He's too young. But have a look at his birth certificate. He's 15. But boy, and then he went through this massive growth spurt. But with that, unfortunately, came some stress fractures in the back. So he was kind of missed probably close to 18 months of football, and
Through the back stuff.
Yeah, and then during that period, and full credit to him and obviously our staff, just got his body into the gym, slowly building, and then came out of it like such a strong, fit, and confident person in his own body. And he just went. So he had the technical ability already. He had a great engine, good speed, but the body was letting him down through that 15, 16 to 18 period, and then from 18 onwards, he just took off and didn't get back.
Can I just ask you guys? It's interesting because I had a conversation the other day with a player who's quite small and his parents, and they've just been told by their club that they're very worried that he's not growing and this and that.
Okay.
Have you guys had experience or seen players where actually it's because they're so small they can't progress their career?
We haven't.
I've seen that actually happen.
Yeah, we haven't really. Well, we don't do that. We don't really care what size they are. I think there's a history of shorter players in world football at best. we got, and I'm sure Marco won't mind me saying it, Tills is not the tallest guy going around, but when I saw him at Sydney, I thought, wow, this kid's special, and it really doesn't matter. Yeah, we've got some kids in the academy that probably are a little bit younger, and some of them probably the most talented ones that will go through a growth spurt, but we have a pretty good handle on where they're going to go, where their growth, when it's going to happen, and to what level they'll get. We do our homework with that.
Yep.
How do you guys choose? This must be one of the toughest parts, like choosing who to keep around because you believe in their talent so much. And things might be delayed through whatever. Yeah. But what is the key factor that you would say, you know what, we have to bank on him because he will come good?
I think, that's true. We're for, and again, I would probably love to start the academy younger, but again, we're not allowed to at the moment because of federation rules. But when we bring them in, and we scout them from 7, 8, 9, 10 years of age through our football school.
7?
Within our football school, starting as young as 5. Our select squad start as young as kind of under 8.
So you're already looking at them.
Absolutely.
Already thinking.
Yeah, definitely. And I think, before puberty, you see the essence of the player, the technical foundation, how they move, and then that probably gives you a sense you can be more patient with them. So if they're going through a tricky growth spurt, let's be really patient because this kid's going to come through. And sometimes they do, sometimes they don't with their growth. That's part of it. So that's why I'm seeing them a bit younger and understanding the quality traits they have, because often they that resonates the whole journey. But I think, and Michael speaks about this all the time with me and the coach, it is the character of the kid, character of the parent. Mm-hmm. So if they've got strong character, if they're doing the extras, if their IDP's up to scratch, they're super committed and that commitment's coming from within them, then we know, okay, that they can be a player. If that's not there, it's going to be difficult for them. Yeah.
What's the policy on, I don't want to say troublemakers, but I want to say maybe kids that are doing stuff outside that you think you're not helping yourself here, buddy, like you're not helping your career. Is it straight away talking to the parents? Is there a no-nonsense policy? Like, what's the go with that? Or is every situation different?
Oh, look, it is a bit. We understand players come from different backgrounds and different walks of life and all that, and respectful of that. So we get it, and kids are kids. They're going to do things. They go through their teenage years, and but we have a pretty strict kind of code of conduct, which can sometimes be like a three-step process in terms of warnings and different things. But we try and educate as much as we can. We've had different education sessions, whether it's around mental health, whether it's around cybersecurity and all sorts of things to try and educate the players the best we can.
Social media.
Oh, how do you deal with that?
You tell me. You're the expert.
I just yell at people. As soon as I see a comment that's saying something bad, I'm like, I've got time for you today. But as a kid in an academy, the last thing you should do is respond to anything. So don't listen to me.
We had a kid who, and he won't mind me mentioning, but he's recently gone to the Indonesian under-16 team, and he left with about 1,000 followers on Instagram and come back with 150,000. So
sure,
his world's changed completely because they're football mad there and a lot of followers, and they had a good tournament with where they played Australia in the AFF tournament recently under 16s. So his world looks completely different now. We've got to help manage him through that for sure. But
150,000 from 1,000.
Yeah.
So
all we got to do is play for the under-16 Indonesian team. Podcast will be like
your number, is it?
Yeah, that's similar, I think. Somewhere in there.
So do you have any names for us of kids coming through that to keep an eye out? Are you allowed to?
Yeah, look, I think the younger ones, there's lots of top talent there, and I think the ones in the next couple of years that have just signed scholarships.
Yeah, I don't think we've announced all of them, but like the ones that are probably the next batch coming through that we've given scholarships to this year is Lawrence Wong, Medin Mehmedi, Peter Antonio is fullback. Who I missed? Oh, Jaden
Nikovsky.
Yeah.
Jaden Nikovsky.
Seemed to be very good.
Yep.
Harry Shillington.
Yep.
Fullback. Quite a few. Yeah, I mean, that's from one season from our NPL. They've all got scholarships this year, so it's a lot. I think 7. I think we might have missed some.
No, 7 scholarships this year from our NPL team. Which is a good thing.
There's 2 lads that I personally know they're killing it, so keep doing your thing. You'll know who you are.
I won't go any younger because I don't want to leave anyone out. I've got lots of talent.
And there's still, 3 or 4 that we're still looking at.
Yep.
We've got that bunch, that age group is pretty strong in our academy.
Yeah.
It's almost basically nearly the first or second group that have come through all the way from our football.
You look at that
schools program.
07, 08, they were the first ones that started. Jaden and say Lawrence, they started in the football school together, signed at the academy at kind of 12 years of age. It's the first cohort we've ever had come through the full academy.
Wow.
Just
So
since our existence. From the bottom up. So, yeah, everyone speak, and we're still very new in our academy existence in terms of having a full cycle at starting at under 14, but say these kids are coming in at kind of 12 years of age and going all the way through. But then even being able to work with them prior to that in the football school, so get in contact with them at 9, 10 years of age. And we're really seeing that, I think, well, hopefully everyone will see the fruits of that over the next few years.
It's so strange the Federation aren't letting you give a pathway. The whole problem is the pathway from 7 to first team, right? Everyone's always complaining there's no pathway.
Yeah.
You just can't have a pathway.
Yeah,
until 14 or whatever you're saying.
Yeah, we'd like
pretty much.
Yeah, we'd like to. I think eventually it's going to change. It has to.
Yeah.
But at the moment we can't, unfortunately. But
fair enough.
It doesn't stop us from identifying the kids. And again, our city football schools program is a fantastic program for pre-entry really into our academy because obviously we're looking at every single kid. We've got great coaches in there. We've got our academy coaches that actually coach in the program. We've got some really good up-and-coming coaches that end up coming into our academy and, eventually some of them into our first team coaching group. So, it's a good program.
Do you have anything else on that?
No.
Just on that, there's this big thing. I mean, it's happened for a while, but especially I feel like now because of social media and everything, this whole pure profit thing a club I support does it a lot, Chelsea, with building up all these players through the academy and just flicking them off for 20 mil here, 20 mil there, 20 mil here, 20. Obviously, your main aim is to get these guys, first of all, in the men's senior team, and then, which has happened a few times, Socceroos.
Yep.
How do you navigate this new sort of market where these young talents are going for crazy prices? Will we see Melbourne City kids or Australian kids in general go for these stupendous prices within the near future? Is that something that's on the horizon for you guys?
I'd love that. That means we're producing, pretty world-class players.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the ideal.
Yeah.
And that's the objective. And I think the way it's going, we're going to. I mean, you see Irankunda going to Bayern Munich and he's doing well. Whether he's going to be a first-team player there, I don't know. It's still early, but we hope he does because then that opens a door for other players. But we've done it in the past with players who have played in top teams in the top divisions around the world. It just hasn't happened for a while. But, ultimately, we've also got to accept that players want to play at the highest level they can, and we encourage that. We don't discourage that.
Yeah.
If Bossy can go and play for Manchester City, fantastic one day. So we don't have a ceiling in terms of where we want these players to play. Obviously, we want them to come into their first team. Love for most of them to be Socceroos, and we've had a pretty good record with the boys that have come through the academy.
Bad.
But if they can go on and play in the best teams in the world, and we get rewarded for it, that's great. But again, there's no ceiling on where we want these players to go, and I think it's good for football in general. That the players are playing at the highest levels possible.
Yeah, and it will help with the name of Australian footballers.
100%.
Because there was
100%.
a time where you might look at an Australian and think, I'll take an Argentinian kid over an Australian kid. Yeah. But now, slowly, things are changing and hopefully...
Yeah, that'll happen. The more successful the Australian boys are, and we look at our own players, look at Aidan O'Neill's captain of the club, a big club in Belgium, Geordie's doing great things in Belgium, so Westerlo. So it's going to happen. It's just another cycle to go through.
Can you talk to, just from your experience from behind the scenes, is that the only sustainable model for an Australian team to financially fund their youth and their development and all that stuff? Is that the only model that really
I don't know
works?
if it's the only model. I think it's certainly one that will go a long way to making it sustainable because of the money that's there in transfer fees, potential transfer fees. We're not quite getting them now. We've been pretty fortunate. We had 2 players break the Australian record, which is fantastic. But, I had this conversation with Brian Marwood and we talked about Jordan Boss, for instance. And he said, Mike, I've got a player in our academy. He's a fullback. He's half the player of Jordan Boss, and I'm getting offered 10 times the amount. But because Jordan Boss is Australian, they look at it, differently. So
for sure.
even in those
sure.
negotiations, it was part of my narrative was, why are you trying to get him for nothing? You rate him so highly. If that kid was from Argentina or England or somewhere else, you wouldn't blink an eyelid at the price we're asking.
100%.
And I think we've got to be stronger with, and I think we are getting stronger with that as clubs, to say, well, why do we devalue our players?
Yeah.
They are worth what the same talent is worth in England or Italy or Spain or wherever.
Because it looks cool if they get that big move, but then it's like, okay, well, the money needs to match that.
Absolutely. Yeah. If you think he's a great player and he's going to be a great player for your team, well, he should be paying for it, and not try and devalue that player because he's Australian. But just going back to the question, I think it is a really important next step for Australian clubs to realise the real potential value in the players.
Because I did a bit of maths on the selling fees for River Plate, Chelsea since 2016. River Plate made like 180 million or something just from selling players. Obviously, that funds everything else that they do.
Exactly,
and it's so important. And people don't want to talk about it too much, but it's so important.
It's a fact. It's
the
fact
way
of
it runs.
Football life. There are leagues that are going to be, for want of a better word, I hate using it too much, but a feeder.
Yeah, exactly.
Our players want to play at the highest levels. Hopefully one day Australia's in the top 4 leagues in the world, so we don't have that problem. But it's a long way off. It's not.
Can you talk to what do they call it when if a kid does his youth here at City
Training.
and then the training
compensation?
Can you talk to that? How does that work? And do you guys get a fee?
It's basically we get a fee depending on when the player started with us. The older he was, the more money per year that we would get. This is if the player leaves without a transfer fee. So
and it's a standard fee.
He's out of contract. It's a standard fee that depends which league he's going to as well. So if he's going to the top tier leagues, they've got to pay more than if he's going to, a Belgian league, for instance, is not the same as Italy or England or Spain or France or Germany. So there is compensation depending on how long the player was with you, what ages he was. If he was with us when he was 12 or 14,
I think it starts as much as every age after they're 12.
We get more and more for each age after 12, 13.
So I remember when I signed at Victory, there was a period where Independiente in Argentina were asking for 20 grand or something like that.
Yeah.
But none of the Australian clubs that I'd spent more time at were asking for any money.
Yeah.
You're going to follow it up.
PL and that kind of stuff, And,
I think it's something that maybe the local clubs don't always do because I think it's a lot better now because the Federation tracks it. But in the past, you had to follow it up. If they didn't know you were going or they didn't follow it up, there was money owed to them, but if you don't follow it up, you don't get it. It's a little bit different now. There's clubs get prompted to claim some money.
Simon, just going back to the academy side of things, what is the go when it comes to getting talent from other teams to join City? Like, talk us through that.
Yeah, so I think our main cohort we bring in is the under 14 age group every year. So this year we're looking very closely at under 12s to bring in. Next year is 12, 13. We play a lot of our players up to challenge them appropriately. Now, a lot of these players are now Melbourne City Football School. About 95% of our under 14s last year came through that program.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So we get to work with them in there and then potentially bring, but they all play for their own clubs. And a lot of their clubs we have really good relationships with and try and build that to manage the player accordingly because, what they're doing there is really important. What they're doing here is really important. And then that kind of turnover is important when they come into our system. Some clubs work with us more. Some clubs like to keep a hold of their players and everyone's got their own right to do whatever they want with their players. Most clubs now are really supportive of the football ecosystem here and understand the pathway for players that they need to come into A-League environments. And I think when we first started the academy kind of 4 or 5 years ago, it was less so. These clubs were kind of like, no, we do things better. But now they're seeing the fruits of these players that are coming through and playing first team and much more supportive.
They were like, at the start, they were a bit iffy, like, no, why would we just give our best? But now it's almost for the betterment of the game.
Yeah. And look, I think the club benefits. So, if they can put on social media with 4 players sign at Melbourne City, then they're going to attract 30 players in the background to their club because they see it as a pathway club. Some clubs don't see it that way, but we've seen it with some of the local clubs we work with. Dandy City are a great one, Berwick City are a great one. That they're now attracting a lot of good, talented young players because we've signed players from our academy from those clubs.
Do the kids, do you get a feel of, do the kids come in and think, oh, this is a totally different ball game? Like, even adapting to just being at a facility like this, for some, it might even be, if they're that good, they're probably going to back themselves, but it might be a bit overwhelming coming into a setup like this rather than going to play somewhere and,
Oh, look, sometimes we see it where academy football is not necessarily for everyone. It's a different ball game for them. And, we speak to parents at the start. We put high expectations in there. So we talk about high challenge but high support. So we're going to challenge the players a lot. Yep. We try and support them a lot. But sometimes that challenge is too much and, can affect educate. We try and be really good at the schools and different things. But sometimes that challenge is a lot in that competitive environment where they go from being their best player at their local club to being, just amongst a whole group of really talented players, and players can struggle with that. But most of their time they adapt really well. Like I said, we have a process when they come in and try and get them used to the environment and used to the style of play and the individual development and all those things. And the biggest one is sometimes it takes them a long time to use the resource we've got. So the gym, the analysis, the physios, whatever it is, they're like, oh, we're not used to it. But
they almost feel like, oh, that's not my place to go in there or whatever.
Yeah, a little bit like that. I think our under-14s coach was telling me before, like at the start of the year, there was 1 or 2 players doing clips. Now every player does their clips every single weekend. 10, 15 clips come into the coach straight away, where it just takes time to build that, I guess.
How frequently would you say that you have missed a player and all of a sudden they pop up at 16, you're like, haven't seen them before and you have to bring them in?
That's talent ID. Yeah, like it happens. Sometimes you miss players, and like you said, you mentioned 16 there, and that's when they come through that physical development. That's probably when you see, you go, oh, okay. Before, you maybe didn't see it because their technical foundation was there, but now they've got super physical traits that might be a super strength of theirs. What we've seen now, and I think, Vidi in the first team and these guys are even commenting, the kids that have come with us at 11, 12 years of age, their technical foundation and tactical understanding and all that is at such a high level than the players that maybe came in a bit later. It doesn't mean that they can't make it, because we've seen Mehdi Mehmedi come in he signed when he was 14, which seems late, but 14, 15, and now he's made it. So he's developed really, really well since coming in. So there is, examples like that, of course. And we miss players, of course we are. Scouting's, there's no perfect science to it.
It just seems from the outside like it's happening less now than what it did when I was growing up. Like, we got Andrew Naboo walking past before, and I'm like, no one noticed him until all of a sudden he signs a victory at whatever it was, 21 years old or something.
Yeah.
But it feels like it's happening less now.
And that's where you see when you come through, or Andy and these guys, the academies didn't exist. So the kids weren't getting the quality training from 9, 10, 11 years of age that they do now, and the programs that they do now. So, you probably see less and less because the foundation of these players is top. But like I said, there's still lots of examples out there where players will come through a bit later. We're not silly today, and we're always looking for that talent, of course. But the foundation these kids are building is really, really strong these days. In Melbourne particularly, which is the market we know best, but also across the country.
I think it's a good point you made about Andrew Naboo. I had the same situation with Michael Moroney. I don't know if you remember Michael. Yeah. He went through, I'm pretty sure he went through the AOS, but I went to see him at an NPL game. Back in Adelaide, at that stage, we didn't have any academy teams. And I used to go around as a CEO, football director, going to all the NPL games scout. And I just noticed him at a game, and I think he was 20 years of age. He just made it coming into our NYL team that year. And 3 or 4 years later, he's playing for the Socceroos. But that happens less now, and I think we miss players less now than what we did.
Yeah, our network's much bigger in terms of our scouting network and coaches we have, the amount of games we watch, and we're across it a lot more. And look, there's more opportunities for players. Like, I think, similar age, there was Victory Youth, there was one team at the time and barely had a youth team. Yeah. And now you've got 3 A-League teams in Melbourne, so a lot more players are getting sighted and less players are missing the system, if you like, I think.
Yeah. I think I'm happy on the academy side. I don't think there's anything else. Right. But that was brilliant. Thank you. Michael, let's get into transfers.
Yep.
It's something that our listeners are very interested in, something that I'm very interested in. Let's just break it down as sort of simple as we can, and then we'll get more detailed. So I know they're all different. What does a basic transfer incoming look like, and then an outcoming look like? What would you say are the main steps?
Well, you're talking about from the recruitment phase right through?
Yep. To the signing.
I mean, we start we try and start pretty early on, say January of the previous season. By then we sort of have a good feel how the team's progressing, how the players are progressing, and we take a lot of factors into consideration. So we look at the squad as a whole, look at the balance of the team, positionally. If we've got too many centre halves, we've got not enough fullbacks, too many wingers, whatever it might be. Where is there a glaring deficiency? How are the players performing? Is there someone that's not performing to the standard we would like? Are we likely to lose a player? Because that's really important. In the last couple of years, we've lost. We had a period there where we hardly lost anyone, and then all of a sudden, bang! Players were in demand or players wanted to go back. We also then have a look at what sort of salaries we've got available in terms of the salary cap and budget. So there's a whole lot of considerations that come into play. And then I'll sit down with the coach and say, well, I think this is the way it's going. What are your thoughts? And then obviously the coach has the final input in terms of types of players and the positions that we're looking for.
So he does currently at this club, because I know at some other clubs overseas, we hear of stuff that coaches don't get a say at all. So you were saying
it's
here...
important. The coach has got to have the final say in terms of the positions he's looking for sure. In terms of the players, he also has almost the final say. But I think it's a pretty good system we have where everybody has a little bit of input. We go out to our scouts. So we'll get a brief together and say, like, we'll use numbers, and we need a 9, we need a 7, we need a 2. These are the characteristics we're looking for.
And how many scouts would you have?
Well, we use the CFG scouts for foreign players. There's countless around the world. I have a head scout here, James, who's in the office. He works with those scouts for overseas players, but he also works locally in not only just in Victoria but in Australia, looking at all the NPL leagues and obviously looking at the Australian players. Obviously, having been involved in the A-League now for nearly 19, 20 years, I have a good grasp on most of the A-League players. And so that we send them a brief. These are the positions we're looking for. This is the salary band that we've got available for that position. And these are the characteristics of the player that we would like, including age, the strengths of the player that we'd like. We want someone, let's say we're looking for a winger, and we really want someone, for instance, that's really good at breaking a line, so with pace, and maybe on the other side we want someone who's a more ball player. They're the things that we can give them. And then so they'll go out, have a look, see what's available. They'll form a long list of potential players. From that long list, then they start to cut it down because some of the players are not obtainable for salary or contractual reasons, or don't quite fit the brief. And then we get a short list of players, and then I'll go through that short list with our head of recruitment, and we'll probably, he's not going to fit the bill and whatever. And then we probably get down to 2 or 3, and then I'll go through it with the coach and say, any of these players that you really like or don't like, and that normally gets filtered again. Sometimes he won't like any of them. Sometimes he might like one.
How often does again, pardon my ignorance, but how often does the coach or people at the club maybe be like, I've never heard of this guy, like, do we take a chance?
Most times, 99 times out of 100, we wouldn't have heard of the player.
Okay, fair enough.
A starting player, unless we're signing a big name player, which we haven't done for a while. So most times we don't really know the player. But what we normally get is a pretty good reference from our scouts who will know the player quite well because they specialise in certain leagues. So they would watch that player pretty well, quite a few times during the season. And then we then go beyond that, and I'll go back to Manchester and say, who do we know in that country? Who are the scouts? Who are the contacts there? And can we get some character references on the player and technical references? And so we put all that into... So
first and foremost, the scouting networks are done with the City Football Group teams or countries that they have teams in?
Basically the scouts will go because we're looking at everywhere around the world.
Okay.
Obviously, the higher the salary, the more leagues come into play. The lower the salary, the big leagues sort of get cut out, unless it's a player who wants to come to Australia and doesn't care about the money.
Yep.
We know about that, which doesn't happen too often. But yeah, so they'll go out right across the world really, and then we'll come back with that. Like I said, that long list gets cut back to a short list, and then we'll sit down with the coach and we'll look at the good, the bad, and the ugly of the players, and then he'll make a final decision on which player he prefers.
That was a brilliant breakdown. Thank you.
Just you touched on scouting the NPL leagues.
Yeah.
How much, not just Citigroup, as far as you know, across the country, A-League teams, how much are they looking into the NPL leagues for?
I think we're always asking the question, but we might be a little bit different because my question then is, okay, is that player that we're bringing in at 24, 25, is he better than the 17 or 18-year-old player that's playing in our NPL 2 team?
Yeah.
And if the answer is, they're about the same, well, I'll push the player that's come through our academy.
Yeah, of course.
So it's been difficult for us to bring in too many players that, unless there's a obvious gap and someone can fill that gap, then we'll never say no.
Yeah.
But it's been more difficult for us here. Probably when I was at Adelaide, I signed a lot more NPL players, different budgets, we didn't really have an academy.
No academy,
but now, it's unusual that we're missing players at an earlier age. But as you said before, players sometimes mature a little bit later, and if an odd one comes up, then we'll definitely look at them for sure.
So let's go back to that timeline of you've narrowed it down to 2-3 players. You want a winger, you want a DM.
Yep.
Who's contacting? Are you contacting the clubs, the agents first?
I then take over the negotiations normally with the agent.
With the agent,
Yeah.
okay.
And then sometimes it's negotiations go south because they want too much money or whatever the reason might be, and then we have, okay, is option B good enough?
Yep.
Yeah, option B is good enough. Okay, well, let's go with option B. Or if option B was not good enough, then we go back into the scouts and say, no, didn't work out, let's go again. And we'll try and get another group. As time goes by, you get different players that are coming up for whatever reason. Some of them are not available because they're still in negotiations, or they think the club's going to recontract them.
Yep.
Or they've got another year of their contract, and all of a sudden a new coach comes in and says, no, don't want him. He's on the.
So it can all change.
Yeah, it can all change very quickly from month to month.
So that's done. And then let's say option B wants to come in, he wants to sign.
Yep.
Then you're facilitating that whole process, basically.
Facilitating that whole process, yeah. Until it gets to the point where we've got an agreement in place, we've signed a letter of offer or a contract, and then I'll hand over to our medical staff, to our operational staff to organise the logistics, the travel, medicals, whatever. Sometimes we do the medicals in overseas, wherever they are, before they come. Sometimes we'll do them here, depending on the player and the locality of the player.
I've always been interested in the presentation that clubs give to players to try to persuade them, for lack of a better word. Can you give us a little bit of an insight on maybe some key things that go into that presentation of like, this is why you should sign for Melbourne City. Here are the key reasons. We've got this, and this. You'll get this, and like what goes into that?
Yeah, I think it's a good question, and I'm sure every club, has its own way of doing things, and everyone's trying to sell their own club.
Yeah, of course.
And we work on. Obviously, we're part of the group. There's 13 clubs in the group. We talk then about particularly about the way we play football, and the reason why we've approached you is because we think you suit our type of football and you're perfect for that position. So we talk a little bit about that and we show them a little bit about that. Obviously, we have conversations with me, coach, and the player, even before we get to the stage of signing a contract. So the players can ask any questions they want. Coach can get a feel for what the players like. But in the presentation, we'll obviously have videos of the facility. We have videos of our training session. We'll have videos of Melbourne. It's a fairly extensive presentation that we make to the players. And luckily, most times they're pretty impressed with everything that we put forward. But ultimately, they really, we really want players that want to come. If I've got to push, convince a player too much, I actually don't like it. And normally those negotiations don't end up being too successful. Either because we've changed our mind, or the players not really keen to come. So it's the attitude of the players is really important. They want to come. They want to come for the right reasons.
How long did it take you? You said you've been in the A-League for 19, 20 years now, so you've got a little bit of experience. But how long did it take you to, I guess, learn how to navigate such tense conversations? Because this is a lot of money on the line. Yeah. People are moving their whole lives over, or even players leaving the club. Like, how do you navigate that? What are some key things that you always try to tell yourself, these are my principles, this is what I go by? Like, talk to us about that.
I think first and foremost is being completely honest.
Yeah.
Trying to sell someone something that actually doesn't exist, it's not going to work. Because sooner or later the player's going to smell a rat.
Yeah.
or you've got the wrong player, and relationship will completely break down. And that's one thing that I'm pretty hard with the agents as well. This is exactly what it is. This is, warts and all, and I want you to be the same. And if I feel that there's a bit of cloak and dagger stuff going on, I'll pull out of the negotiations. It's not the type of people that I want at this club. And I think, particularly over the last 5 or 6 years, we've been really hard on that, making sure that the character of the person that comes in, whether that's a staff member or whether it's a player, coach, that the character's right. It's just experience, really. The more negotiations you have, and I can't remember how many players I've negotiated contracts with, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, but you tend to know. I now know the boys sometimes get amazed. After the first conversation, I normally know where it's going to go.
So you reckon after the first one, you've got this gut feeling?
Yeah, and it's 99 times out of 100, it's normally right. You get that. You just get the feeling by the words that are used, the tone.
Yep.
The people that you're talking with, you know whether it's going to be successful or not, or if they're being honest or not.
Just on that transfer policy, in terms of, now this is such a hotly debated topic, and we even spoke about it last week with Douglas Costa coming in, and I personally said that from my research, all of the previous clubs were saying, "Oh, you have signed a dead man." Blah, 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 blah. You guys, as of recently, I feel like maybe haven't been too strong on that whole. I mean, there's been a few here and there, but how do you go between, do we go for the big dog who's going to bring in crowds, or do we go for the lesser-known player who's maybe going to be not as impactful, but it's less stress? Like, talk to us about how do you identify what the club really needs? Like, are you going to go get a 35-year-old just because of his name, or are you going to go get that 27-year-old?
Yeah, we're probably a little bit different, and I think there's nothing wrong with bringing big names in. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Obviously, people talk about it.
Yep.
The league needs people talking about it, and I think it's fantastic to have players like Costa and Mata coming into the league. We probably haven't gone down that road. Obviously, we haven't, and we've had pretty good success not going down that road. We look at it from the point of view is, okay, what are the type of players we need to be able to play, first of all, our type of football, and secondly, to be successful. And when you're hanging your hat on one person for that success, it's really difficult. So we like to spread it around, make sure we've got good depth in most positions and the right players in most positions, and we're looking to be successful because we had to be. Going back 7 or 8 years ago, we did spend a fair bit of money on some players. Since we were documented, we had Timmy Cale here, and
Harry.
Yeah, and sort of turn the dial a little bit, but it didn't give us any success. And I think our supporters really wanted us to be successful. Obviously, Victory that around the corner, that early days were very successful, and it was important for us to have that success and show our supporter base that we're serious about playing football here and winning. Not just about the bling.
Well,
that doesn't mean that we won't in the future.
Yeah.
Our strategy could change. It could change next year. Who knows? I don't know. At the moment, that's not on the radar. But I don't want to put it off the radar because, as I said, things can change, and I think it's important. It's the right player, for your group, and he adds value. This is my own personal opinion. That he adds value to your chances of being successful, and it's not just about the crowds. I think if you can find the right balance between the two, then it's a perfect fit.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you ask any fan with their head screwed on properly, they're going to take success over a big name player coming and finishing 7th.
Yep.
So it was just, it was interesting to get.
Can you do both? You know, that's will that player allow you to do both? And that's really the $1 million question. You know, and I think so far I'm not sure if anyone's brought in a big name and won the league.
We spoke about it last week. A lot of these, like, don't get me wrong,
Season one.
Season one, Dwight York. Yes.
That's all I can remember.
Yeah.
we spoke about it last week.
Was at Adelaide and we won the Premier's Plate. Finished 10 points out of Sydney with Dwight York. So, they won the grand final. Yeah, when I say win the league, I look at it the Premier's Plate.
So do we.
It's winning the league. Yeah. You know, but in terms of finishing top with a big name, it hasn't happened yet.
I haven't looked at it like that. Well, we were speaking last week specifically on the pod about we were just sort of doing a basic rating of whether they were hit or miss, like these big marquee signings, and more often than not, it's ended sourly or the team hasn't been successful. So I guess that plays into it. But like you said, the $1 million question is if you can get both.
Perfect scenario. You know?
Can I just ask you, Michael, in terms of what you know of the general process of who the main decision maker is, and can you explain sporting director, coach in general, not specifically with here, but normally how does it run?
I suppose I've been at Adelaide United for 10 years, been here for 9 years now, and probably it's been similar between both those clubs in terms of who makes the final decision, and sometimes it's a sporting director, sometimes it's a coach, but I'll never bring in a player that a coach doesn't want as a sporting director. I've never, ever done that. You know, there are probably some clubs where the owner has made a final decision. I'm not sure. But certainly at Adelaide and here, it's never been the owner making the final decision, nor has it been me that says to the coach, you have to have that player, because it can't work. It just won't work that way. There's been times where coaches wanted a specific player and I've said no, but there's been a good reason for it, whether it's we can't afford him or we've had some background information on the player that the coach wasn't aware of.
Yeah, right.
So I'll overrule it on that basis. But otherwise, most times, in fact, every time the coaches have had to say, I'd like that player. You know.
Yeah. That reminds me. I don't know if you've seen it. I don't know if you've seen in the Sunderland documentary when they're looking to sign players, and then I can't remember his position. He was some height. He goes, "What about Zlatan? How's it looking?" And everyone's like, "Mate, shut up." Like we can't even afford.
I hear you. I don't think it's of the player. I haven't had that. You know? Can we get Messi?
Maybe not.
What about De Bruyne? Yeah. You know. So I think it's got. I really feel, as a sporting director, that you've got to have a really close relationship with your coach. You know, and it's got to be an honest one, and it's got to be a little bit of give and take on both sides. You know, and that comes with, you know, again, it comes with honesty, I think, and being completely transparent with each other and knowing each other really well. My job, first of all, is to get the right coach. You know, so I make, you know, obviously in collaboration with my chairman and Simon Pearce, our CEO, Brad Rouse, Brian Marwood, and myself. We would make the final decision on a coach. Usually, it's my recommendation, and you know, I'll get back. I've been backed really well by them. But, you know, so it's my responsibility then, if that coach comes in, to make sure I give him the best platform possible to be successful, you know. But the relationships, and that's whether it's me and the CEO or, you know, me and Simon, or that's the fabric of a club. You know, if you have good relationships with people, working relationships with people, you can have success. You can have sustained success. Without that, you can have success, but I think it's fleeting. You can't have sustainable success without good relationships.
Just on that, in terms of recruiting coaches, so every coach in the academy would go through you, or does it go through Michael?
Initially to myself, and then Michael will sit on a call with them as well to have a chat and work through a few things, and then make the call together.
I say, Simon, you got someone in mind? Yeah. You'll bring some names up. We'll discuss them. Normally, it's fine.
Is there how do you find these coaches? Like, where are you finding them from?
It's interesting. Look, a lot of our coaches have come through our football school program, so they'll coach there, maybe coach at a club as well. I think when we're playing across the NPL, and one of our coaches, Lewis, and he won't mind me mentioning, but I was watching him when we played Northcote back 5-6 years ago, and I think we won the game 3-1 or whatever it was, but their style was really nice style of football, and maybe players that aren't as capable as our players potentially, but So we knew that he truly believed in the style and how we want to develop these players. And that's nearly most important for us, like Mark said earlier, coaches that believe in what we're trying to do. So always trying to look for that.
Yeah. What about in terms of a head coach of the seniors team? Like, what key traits are you looking at? Is it similar to sort of signing a player and doing the whole long list and the short list?
It is, yeah.
What's that like?
Yeah, it's the same. We obviously we're very lucky. We have a really strong data and insights team in Manchester that are able to produce a lot of data on. First of all, we look at style of football that they've coached. Have they been able to improve the teams that they've coached, for instance? Then, are they available? Are they within the salary range that we've got available? Because that obviously eliminates a lot of the coaches. Because obviously, I want Pep Guardiola, but Pep's not. So we look at all of that. First, foremost for me is I'd like to have an Australian coach. I think it's important that we promote, and even in the past, and we've been fortunate, we've been able to bring like Patrick Kisnorbo up through the academy and the women's team, and we try and promote the academy coaches as much as we can because they know our style of play, they know our philosophy, they know our DNA, they know our values, our culture and what we stand for. I don't have to ask the questions because I already know. But again, it goes back to bringing good people in. So there is a process that we go through, and then we get to a shortlist, see who's available, we'll interview them, and then we'll make a decision based on that information and from the interview.
And what is the access to Man City and Pep and
to Pep, it's difficult,
his education,
obviously.
stuff
He's
like
been
that?
in Melbourne once. When I travel to Manchester, I've been lucky enough, I've had 2 or 3 conversations with him, probably had more conversations with Chicky, but yeah, look, as you can imagine, he's busy, he's got lots on his plate, and it's not easy to access. He's got a lot of things to do. But when he's been available and, been around the place, he's been,
Well, I'm imagining some of the stuff that he's implementing there, he'd be sending through to your database as this is something that I'm seeing that's helping us.
Yeah, from an academy sense, we have an online portal that the CFG clubs have access to. With a lot of this content goes on. We have actually a academy directors call once a month as well, where we share things and different research or whatever that's going on at the clubs. And I know Mike was on probably weekly calls with CFG as well.
Regular contact. I mean, it's not as if Pep says, "This is what I'm doing, share it." I'm sure there's a lot of stuff that he keeps. He doesn't do that, but we have access to some of the stuff that has been done in the first team, how they're playing, what they're doing. And then that gets analysed. The coach educator, Mark Leyland, who meets with all of our academy directors and our coaches around the group quite regularly, and we share that information. What are you guys doing, for instance, building up from the back, are you doing something different? We share that. Oh, yeah, that looks good. We might try that. So we do cross-pollinate what we're doing, but it's very similar. Most clubs are doing things in a very, very similar way. Some a bit more, some a bit less, but, we try and stick to the way we want to play. And, within that you have some freedoms. But the essential principles, the basic principles have to remain the same.
Just going back to how we were talking about valuing Australian players going overseas and, Boss should have been, we could say Boss should have been maybe worth more because he's Australian, he might not get that fee. How do you actually come up with that number? What is that based on? And then also on the other side, the tricky side of outgoings is like terminating a contract, players giving you a hard time, wanting to leave.
Yeah.
Talk to us about both of those processes.
Again, we're lucky we're able to get, like for Bossy, for instance, we know what that club has paid previously.
Okay.
We know the types of players that have gone into Belgium at that age, that age and that position. What are they paid for the players? What's the average? And then we sort of try and make a comparison. So we've had that sort of information before, but sometimes you don't quite get that figure again because the club's saying, well, he's Australian. Well, on this occasion, the argument was, I don't really care, he's Australian.
That's such a weird thing to say. But
so we're lucky with that. We're able to get that sort of information pretty quickly, a quick turnaround. And that goes back, we can get information that goes back over the last, say, 10 years or so, and then more recent information. So it gives us a better handle on because transfer fees are changing constantly. And most of the time it's going north. So, Yeah, so that's how we sort of figure that out.
Yep.
Now, what players have gone in the past, out of Australia? That's the other.
So in terms of sort of the darker side of outgoings, if you have to terminate a contract, if you feel like a player's not abiding by that, or another club has come in, because correct me if I'm wrong, there's no transfer fees in the A-League.
No, not
from
at the
club to
moment.
club.
Not at the moment.
Why is that?
It's something that's on the agenda. I think PFA particularly have been against it. Some of the clubs have been against it previously, saying, well, the clubs that have got money will just pay the transfer fees. But my counter-argument is, well, you don't have to sell the player.
Yeah.
If the club's got a player and they don't want to sell him, you don't have to sell him. But if the club's got a player and needs the money, or doesn't want the player anymore, and they can get some money for the player, then there's nothing wrong with it. So my view is we should be allowed to. I think it should be an open market.
Yeah.
It also, I think, adds interest to the season. You guys can start talking about transfers, for instance, between club and a club.
Oh, yeah. Not everything's a handshake, because that's what it is at the moment, technically.
I think it's something that we should introduce. I
seen-
think it's getting closer.
Have you seen the stuff about Petrarca at Melbourne Demons, the AFL stories at the moment?
Yeah.
What would you do in that scenario if a player comes out, for those that don't know, a player comes out and says, I don't want to be here anymore, I want to leave? What would you do?
I think if you really wanted the player, you try and convince him to stay. But in my experience, if the player doesn't want to be there, it normally ends up in tears. So I'm very much of the school where if the player is really valuable player and you want him to stay, try and work through things. And if he's fine with it, that's great. If we can't work through it, then we find a way for the player to go, and the club doesn't get too affected. But the reality is the players normally hold the cards. Player tells you he doesn't want to be there, doesn't want to play, then it's very hard to keep a player under those circumstances, in my experience.
Yeah, it must be a tricky sort of field to navigate, where it's like, okay, he is very good for us, or he's done this or whatever, or he could be this type of player in the future. Yeah. Those conversations must get extremely heated, and it's crazy, because I'd crack straight out. Like, there's you want to leave? Fuck off.
Yeah.
But
mate, of course, sometimes you are tempted to do it that way. But, as I said, most times there's a legitimate reason for a player not wanting to be with you, You just got to try and work through what's the truth. If I feel there's something behind the reasoning, then I'll try and get to the bottom of it before I make a decision on whether we should let that player go.
Now, obviously, you don't have to confirm or deny these, but are some of them like they don't want to live in Australia? Is that a thing?
Yeah,
or more money? Or
we had the issue with Thomas Lamb and Richard Van der Ven. who were both contracted, looked like they were really happy. All of a sudden, Thomas, his wife, is pregnant, missing her mum, missing her family, wanting to go back. The player's caught between really wanting to stay in Australia because he loved it, but the wife saying doesn't want to be here. Is that going to end well? Is the player going to be able to concentrate on playing football when his wife leaves, goes back, and he's having shit? No, it's not good for us. It's not good for him. So we let him go.
It's not worth it almost.
And then that actually started a little bit of a domino effect because then Richard Van der Ven, his wife was very close to Thomas Lamb's wife. They were both from Holland. She doesn't have any friends. My goalkeeper coach, he was Dutch, ended up going back to Holland, getting a job in Ajax, and that was basically a Dutch. Just give me an example of how the things can change very quickly, and all of a sudden, Richard Van der Ven comes to see me. He says, "Mate, I love it here, but my wife now she's on her own," and she's like, so we let both of them go, and they were both very good players. And I could have said, "No, you got another year." Then I've got two players who, are not going to be happy. Are going to be upset with you. And I don't know how that's going to affect their form. And,
it's going to be a toxic change room.
Yeah, it's just, at the end of the day, we don't want to lose them, from a premiership side, and we lost them. And that was on the top of, Bossy getting a transfer, Tills getting transferred, Tommy Glover getting transferred, Aidan O'Neill getting transferred. So we lost, 6 or 7 of our starting lineup in one year, which decimated us.
How that sort of crop, and I know people left at different times. You had, I want to say, 6 to 7 amazing players leave
Yep.
How did you navigate that? Because even international players like Valon went,
Yeah,
and
Malon was on loan
Yep.
and he left.
Marco, Geordie. Like, how do you deal with such an exodus of good talent and having to replace that quickly?
Well, it's really difficult, and we, results show that last year we finished sixth. We still made the finals, but for us, it's, it was failure really, in a lot of ways. But there was a lot of reasoning. And then on top of that, we had, Lex out for most of the year. Andy Naboo doing his Achilles. Even though we re-signed Tills, he came back, got injured, significant injury. So we were just decimated by injuries and players leaving, and you can't recover quickly like that. It's impossible. I doubt with any club. I think we ended up losing 13 players. 13 players in 1 year.
All probably starters.
All starters. Well, we let some players go. That in hindsight, if we knew the other ones were going to leave, we probably would have kept.
Yeah.
But we lost. Yeah. Well, most of them were starters. Yeah. I think we started the season with 2 out of our starting 11 from the year before.
How do you deal with, like, okay, we have to plug a gap here? Do we just look for the quick fix to get us through the season, or are you always thinking long-term mentality with these types of signings?
I prefer long-term.
Yeah.
The last year was difficult with so many, so we ended up having to take a couple of loan players.
Yeah.
Who also then left. Yakulis was on loan and Natel was on loan. So, both of them left. But under the circumstances, they were the best players available to us at the time, to fill the hole the holes that we had. So every year is a little bit different. But last year was probably the most challenging year that I've had in terms of having to recruit so many players.
You would say your All A-League.
Yeah. And when we had a premiership team that won the league by 11 points, we finished 11 points in front of Central Coast. And to replace 13 of that lineup, and expectation for us is always that you're going to win the league.
It's bittersweet because a lot of these young players you produce and they're going on to do better things, but it's also like, all right, now we're a bit screwed because,
Well, it's exactly what happens. Instead you put Bossy, Glover, O'Neill, and Tillio, the 4 players who end up playing for Socceroos in 1 year. Young boys, you can't replace them. It's impossible because they're also, because they're younger, and I'm sure they won't mind, they were on lower salaries.
Yep.
But they become very, very good players and very important players to our team. Starting players that have a significant effect on our results. We can't replace them.
I got 2 more questions and then I think we can wrap. The first one is, when these bigger signings come in with egos, if they've played in Europe or they're a high profile player that's played in Asia, how do you help them integrate into the team? Because if we're being honest, a lot of players would have come to the A-League and thought, I'm better than this, or this is not good enough, this is not up to my standard. Obviously, if they see this place, it'd be hard to say that. But in terms of just everything, how do you specifically help them integrate into life, into Melbourne, into the team, into the league? What are some key things that you do?
I think, first of all, is making sure you can get enough information on the person. Is he going to be able to fit in?
Yeah.
Is he going to think he's too good for everybody else?
Yeah.
We don't always get it right. We've had, even recently, a couple of players have come in and not quite being exactly what we thought they were going to be. So there's always an element of risk.
From a personality point of view.
From a personality point of view. But we're very lucky. We have a dedicated person, staff, who's actually not here today, but he basically looks after all of the transition of the
That's his job.
players. That's his job.
Oh,
So organises the flights, is in contact with the player, will pick him up, organise accommodation, organise bank accounts, make sure he's got an Australian number. If he's got kids, making sure the kids, if they're school age, they find the right school.
Wow.
If the wife is looking for a job, we try and help them. So we're pretty good on that, in terms of player welfare, because what we want to do is allow the footballer to be able to come in and play football, and the family, knowing that his family is being taken care of, or his personal life is all under control, without having to worry him and spend too much time on that, because it is a big thing for a player leaving one country and going to another, as you know.
How do you even do these minute? Well, they're not minute, but in the grand scheme of things, when you're buying a player, do you take into account, okay, they're 33, their kids are going through their formative years, like are all these things taken into account? You're bringing them all the way down here. We're no border, an island.
Yep.
Down here in the middle of nowhere, basically.
You do, but it doesn't always work out.
Yeah.
You know, as we've seen, and most times it doesn't work out because of the family situation. You know,
so you would say the family's key.
Family's key. Yeah, the family's key. And the more you can look after the family, the more likely you are to keep the players on a longer term basis. You know, as I said, normally works out. We've had a few that haven't worked out. I don't think there's a foolproof, formula to make sure that every player that comes here is going to be happy. But what we do is make sure the transition's as smooth as possible.
Last one I have on the transfers would be, how much does resale value play into when you sign a player? Now, obviously in the A-League, they go on freeze, but how much importance do you put on that in terms of, okay, they're this age, this is what we can get for them if they do decide to go overseas? Is that a major factor?
It's not a major factor, but I think it's always something that we think, again, we're a little bit harder, and Simon would probably attest to that. When I'm looking at players that come from the academy, I'm looking at players that I think one day can win a championship. I don't want to sign a player to a scholarship that's just going to be an A-League player. For us, it's going to be a player that can be in a championship winning team. And so the expectation, the standards, I think, are a little bit higher, maybe. I don't know. But we certainly, if I think a player's okay to be an A-League player, probably, and that's it, we probably don't.
It's like a run-of-the-mill.
Yeah, and he could sign another A-League club, and that's great. And sometimes, we might get it wrong. Most times we haven't missed too many. But most of the academy boys that we sign have normally been a part of a championship winning team, and I think that's why then they go on to become Socceroos, or they have an international career. And we're doing a lot of work even now, and we're lucky we've got Alessandro and Diamanti, who's obviously play at the highest levels, who's also thinking about that, to produce players that can play at the highest levels in the world, not just at A-League level. Because I think if we aim really high, we're going to get really, really good A-League players that can win championships for you. And that's what it's all about. We don't want players just to fill a gap. Yeah, we want players who can win championships. And if you do that, I think automatically you have a player who's got a great resale value. Yep. As we found in the past. Because also when you're looking, you look at, is he a part of a winning team? Is he got a winning culture? And I think there's an extra value on that when clubs are looking at a player. Does he come from a winning team? Does he come from a winning culture? Gee, if he's playing there and it's the best team in the league, he must be a good player. If he's 18, 19 and he's playing in the top team in the league in that country, he must be a good player. Because I do that. And I'm sure the other clubs, sporting directors or scouts do that,
I'll just wrap it on this one, I guess. Yeah. Going into next season, not the best season last season, what are your maybe personal or overall overarching things for the club that you need to improve on? And then I would say from the academy side as well, what are some things that you guys are working over there? So it's like, no, this has to change. We need to be better at this. What are some key things?
Okay, Simon, with you.
Oh, look, I think from us, it's kind of the first year in the facility and that, so really maximising the resource that we've got here, whether it's with analysis or rehab or whatever it might be. We're really still dipping our toe into it. We're very fortunate to have this around, so we want to continue on that and really maximise, the resources we have in place. But then, just continue growth of the individuals. Our teams all performed really well across the board this year, and we want to do the same next year. But the continued growth of some of these boys that are coming through, continue to help the boys that are now scholarship players, but they've still got a big part in the academy, and we still need to develop and help them, and hopefully we can see them become first teamers 12, 18 months or whenever they're ready. But they're probably a couple of things we're looking at over the next 12 months.
Yeah, look, for the A-League, the first objective was we need to be better in everything that we did, because, in every area last year we needed to improve, but more so probably being consistent. We had really high highs. We had games were 7-1 or 6-0, and then we also had games where we lost 5-0 or 6-0. So we just can't have that discrepancy. We've got to be much more consistent. And if we get that consistency, we're going to get more points. And then we wanted particularly to lower the age profile, because we had quite an older team last year. a lot of players over 30. We've still got a few players over 30, but we've been able to recruit players. Kai Truan is 23, Ferreira's 28, 29, something like that. Andreas Kuhn is 29, and we'll bring in another player probably sometime in the next week who's going to have an age profile around 28. So
you guys aren't done in the market?
No, we've still got another player to come in, and maybe two, but definitely one. So all of them have been under the age of 30, so that our age profile now is a lot younger. Yeah. And then we've added 7 scholarship players to that group. So, the oldest is Shillington, who's 18?
19.
19. So, and the youngest is
Jaden just turned 16.
So our age profile is going to be a lot younger. So we just wanted to, add that youthful enthusiasm to the squad. Because young players are hungry and they want to be successful, but also the late to mid 20s is probably peak for players. So we brought in, as I said, 4 players in that category. But more importantly now is hopefully staying injury free. We want to be fitter, stronger than what we were last year, have less injuries. And I think with that will then come consistency that we didn't have last year. Because as I said, our best was unbelievable, but our worst was terrible. So we just got to find that consistency.
Well, I think even when you went on that run of, being the best team in the league, you had the perfect balance of that youthful enthusiasm, also an experience as well. Yeah. So finding that balance is probably key, really.
Yeah, it is, yeah.
Do you have any more?
I just wanted to ask, is that, because one of my favourite players in the league last year was Tall Guy, Arslan.
Yeah.
Are you able to speak on that one? Like, what was the decision making behind that? Because for me, he was one of the players that I hope stayed in the league.
Look, at Tolgo had, obviously had a good season. He initially wanted to stay, and he wanted an extension to his contract. He had another year to go. We had to think he's 33, 34. Yes, he's had a good season. Let's have a chat about it during the next season. Maybe by Christmas we can make a decision. Let's see how form fitness is. It should be okay. He probably got to a point where he didn't want to wait for that. But I also think there was a very good offer on the table from Japan, and he decided that he wanted out after telling me he wanted to stay. So again, we tried, but I think it got to a point where it wasn't going to work. Yeah, he didn't want to be here anymore. And as much as he was a great player, I can't put one player before the team.
Fair enough.
That was the reason for that.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had a discussion about there was a few players last season that did quite well, that they were kind of in that older bracket and they were maybe internationals that the league didn't hold on to. Yeah. And so I was wondering, is that maybe a push to go away from these older players, international players, and try to, you said you've got 7 scholars on now. Yeah. So
I think just from our club perspective, we like to get a good balance of age, and we didn't have that quite right last year. Because we lost so many players, we had to do some deals that we probably maybe in hindsight wouldn't have done if we didn't have that many players leaving. But we tried to pick the best squad that was available to us. It just happened that a lot of the players were older, and we had players that had been here for 5-6 years that were mid-20s, that now they're in their 30s. It just happened that way.
Yeah.
But I think we've got a much better balance now. Every year's a little bit different, and every club has different objectives in terms of what they want.
I think I'm all good. I pretty much answered everything I had on my checklist. I just want to thank you guys for your time. Obviously, no one gets this access, so we're very grateful for both of your times, and we wish you the best for the season for both the academy and the seniors team. And guys, just a reminder as well, please hit that subscribe button. 5 stars on Spotify. Thank you to Melbourne City again, the media team, all you guys behind the scenes. We really appreciate it. We love you guys. Suited and booted. We're out.